Hey, welcome all. It's good to see you all. As you know, we have Ken here, going to walk us all through the life spiral. I'm not sure how many of you, show of hands, who here knows Ken? Barbara's like, I don't really know him. Cool. We all know and love Ken. He's got many words of wisdom from his experience as a business owner, and including all the personal development and spiritual stuff that comes along with it. You can all tell by his demeanor that he's got everything together, no flaws at all, right?
Exactly. Sure, let's go with that, right?
Yeah.
We're no pressure there, right?
Exactly. But Ken, tell us all about the life spiral. I think this is really for people who feel like they're pretty stagnant in their progress for business and in life. And it really is your, I guess, model for getting people's momentum back, in areas of life that matter most to them. So anyone who feels stagnant, stuck, call it whatever you want, you're not making the progress that you're after, this is the sort of model and system you can put in place that allows it to continue. Is that correct?
Yes. And the whole idea behind it, and I'll get into the specifics of it. I have a presentation that I can share, but the idea is to think in terms of a perspective that allows you to kind of elevate your life gently and without burning yourself out or exhausting yourself with this try harder mindset of all the things you have to do. Because especially right now with the amount of information, if you did all the things that are good for you and your business, like it would take a 48-hour day that would not include sleep. But of course, sleep is important too. It's just overwhelming. So the idea was to create a simple model that gives you three areas in your life that you can focus on, and then identify simple ways that you can shift and adjust that take the circular patterns that we all by nature have in our life and turn them into spirals. So you're gently elevating. And if you think about it, patterns are super important. There's I want to say the book is by Jim Lair. It's called The Power of Full Engagement. And he talks about the fact that willpower, exerting ourselves, is a depleting commodity throughout the day. And that's like when you travel, you're so tired by the end of the day because you have to consciously think about even things like which way you turn the knob on the shower to get water. Like all of the things, all the tasks that we put on autopilot to conserve energy, you can't do that with. So the patterns of our lives actually serve us. But the double-edged sword to it is they can also leave us held in place. So this is an idea, the idea behind this was to create this perspective where you can take yourself through a little review on a periodic basis. I recommend monthly. And you just look at your life through this lens, and then you think, what are some little things that I can do that will lead to significant differences over time? Just like putting $1 in the savings account every day, number one, it'll start to compound, it'll add up. And number two, when the difficulties come, you've actually built up a reserve, a capacity to be able to handle it. So that's kind of the philosophy behind it. And there's two parts to this. The part we're talking about today is the perspective part. And then we also have a part called the 5 practices. That's a process part. And that lets you look at the habits that best serve you in your day and figuring out ways to integrate and weave them into your life gracefully so that you can actually enjoy the process and it isn't just all stress and overwhelm all the time. So that's the purpose behind it. Any thoughts you want to add to that, Tyson?
I think it's a good summary, and I think we can even use this group if you want to have some accountability after this call implementing these systems. If you are doing a monthly review, for example, get on a call with someone, book a call with someone from this group in 4 weeks' time, and do the review with them, making sure that you're consistently moving forward by having that support, that accountability with everyone else in this group. I think that's what's unique about these calls compared to just a presentation, is that we can use our support, our questions, our accountability to actually make a difference. So maybe towards the end we can call that out to anyone who wants to do that.
Yeah, and the other thing, so I'm real big, especially working with organizations, on language that allows you to shortcut how quickly you can understand the people that you're working with. So part of this, it gives you a communication system that you can share with, friends, with family, and you'll see how it works. It's actually really simple. So, all right. So should I just jump into it? Share my screen?
We all ready? Go pen and paper.
Cool.
And go ahead, pen and paper.
Yeah, you might. Yeah, you definitely might want that. Yeah. Yeah, it can help to take some notes. And Tyson, you'll have it recorded and everything too, so that's good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ken, all yours.
All righty. Okay, so hopefully now everybody can see the screen.
Sure can.
Excellent. Let's see here. Oops. I just want to make sure that I can do my little fast forward thing here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, so the first thing I need to do is introduce you all to someone. This is John Fritz, and he was my friend, mentor. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago. He began as my martial arts teacher almost 30 years ago. He was a 10th Dan in Shaolin Kempo. But he was, more importantly, he was a spiritual counselor. And he basically traveled the world looking at all kinds of different philosophies, from Taoism to Buddhism to shamanism. He spent time in South America. And what he was really looking to do was distill down what's the essence, what are all of these things trying to teach, and how do we allow ourselves to practice the essence without getting too caught up in all of the details? How do we, he used to always say, you're not here to serve the art or the philosophy, it's here to serve you. So, and he worked with scientists from NASA. He had a very, very interesting life. So the original concept of this came from him. And he was a rather mischievous man, well into his 70s. And, he would just look at you and he would say, how do you experience heaven on earth? And he'd have this kind of evil twinkle in his eye as he'd ask you that. And you're like, I don't know. I mean, people would freeze like deers in the headlight. And then he would respond by saying 3/8. And you're thinking, okay. And then he'd say, well, how could you experience hell on earth? And now you're like, I don't even know. And his answer to that would be 3/2. And when you would say, what does that mean? He'd say it was simple. So he was explaining this to my partner, Stephanie, at one point. And the way he explained it was like this. This was simple in the world of John. So, and we have kept this. This is a cherished piece of paper that we're in our family center in the cafe, and he was frantically scribbling on this at one of the tables over a cup of coffee. And basically, I'm going to decipher this. And as crazy as this looks, it's actually very, very simple. So basically, his idea was, if you think about these 3 circles in your life, the first one being vitality. And he really liked vitality, and because it encompasses everything from health to your immune system. It's the amount of energy that you have, your life force, and how that's flowing to and through you, in his words. The second circle was your relationships. And this is your relationships both with yourself and with others. And what they're finding right now, especially with all of us so much in the wellness world, there's a lot of talk about beyond wellness. You have to look at the social things that actually directly impact your overall well-being. So the relationships with the people you have, your access to things like infrastructure and doctors and whatever it may be. It's those connections with other humans that dramatically impacts the vitality circle. And then the third one is value. And what he meant by value was your ability to contribute to something that's greater than yourself. And because if we, cultivate vitality, but it doesn't spill over into the world around us, that leaves us kind of a little bit stunted and stilted. And he believed that our capacity for vitality and energy, the depth and quality of our relationships, in part was influenced by the quality of our commitment to the unique contributions that we're making to the world around us. And that could just be being an amazing parent to your children. It doesn't have to be professionally. It's you get to define these three circles however you want. But his whole point was the overlap between these three circles, the integration of them, that's what creates true value and meaning in your life. So that overlap in the center there is kind of the focal point, but you get there by focusing on the quality of the three circles. So what he would say is, and you can even do this for yourself right now, you just create for yourself a subjective number. So if you were to think about the quality of the vitality in your life and you were to give it a number 1 through 10, what would it be? What would it be for your relationships? What would it be for value? And it doesn't really matter how accurate it is. The idea is it's an assessment tool, a self-assessment tool that over time allows you to create trend lines for yourself. So you can start noticing what makes this number go up? What makes this number go down? And, although we're going to be talking about a spiral, the reality of it is spirals move in both directions. And that's the reality of your life. You're not always going to be spiraling in an upward direction. So, we want to recognize that. So basically, in John's world, heaven on earth is when each of these circles is at an 8, which creates, I went too fast. So if you have like a heavy level of overlap between them, right, that's what he would consider heaven on earth. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, as you started to see, hell on earth would be 3 twos, right? Where, you're feeling that these things are, you're not feeling very connected to each of these things, which means that these circles aren't as connected to each other. So if you think about it this way, if your vitality is at an 8, you're feeling good, how much more present and available can you be in the relationships in your life? How much more are you able to show up when you do your work? When you're tired and exhausted and sick, it's really hard to experience as much integration, right? So we nurture and look at each of these circles, but again, we're focused on the overlap between them. And the way that he would do that is with math, because as much as he was a spiritual human, he was also very much a scientist and sort of a pragmatist. So he used this model and he said, all right, let's think of it this way. 3 twos gives you an 8, right? So that would be a life fulfillment score, he would call it. If all of these circles were that low, your total would be an 8. 3 eights is 512. Now, the interesting thing is if you had 3 10s, that's 1,000. That's almost double. So think about how much space there is to experience heaven on earth. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be a 9 or a 10, right? You can experience so much value with space for that to expand up or down. So using that as the reference base, here's an example of how this works. And this is why we call it the life spiral. So let's imagine that, right now, your relationships feel really, really good. You're really satisfied with where things stand. You give yourself a 7. Vitality is about average. You're feeling pretty good overall. You know that there's some things that you should probably improve on, or maybe you're coming off of an injury or an illness or whatever, and you feel underutilized in the value department. Maybe your work isn't taking off the way you want it to, or you're struggling with a coworker, whatever it may be. So if you were to add or multiply those 3 numbers out, you end up with 105 as your life fulfillment score. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you were to take your value and increase it to a 5, so you make a few changes. So maybe you join a new networking group and you start putting together a curriculum, or you study some topic that will help you improve your ability to deliver and your value, or you make a new connection with someone, whatever it may be, you bring that from a 3 to a 5, and then you take your vitality and you just get an extra 30 minutes of sleep a night, or you drink a little bit more water, or you go for a 20-minute walk a day. It's just 1 point, right? One little increase. So we've made these small incremental changes in value and vitality, and we haven't even touched relationships. We're just going to leave that. We're not going to try to do anything with that. Look at what happens to your score. It doubles. It doubles. So you didn't have to do dramatic, exhausting, try harder things to double your subjective fulfillment score in your life, right? And that was his whole point. It's the little things that make the big difference. And, and so often we get caught up in this kind of hustle and grind and do more and work harder. And we're missing the point that we are able to experience this value. And what John, my mentor, wanted to do is make sure that you had a way to quantify it so that you didn't lose sight. We're in our own skin, and we see this for a lot of us with our clients. They don't recognize the value they've created with their own life. It's hard to notice the value of the shoes you're walking in because they're just comfortable in doing their job. So we lose that perspective. So this gives you a way to check in. And what's really cool about it is this becomes something where you can quickly say to someone in your life, right now, I'm feeling like a 773, 3, where's your 3? I'm feeling like a 3 in vitality. I think I'm getting sick. And they'll know, if you're sharing this, if you're communicating in this way, they'll quickly know where you are. Or, over time, the idea is to arrive at 512 again and again, to have moments of 3 8s in your life, and then recognize it and say to someone, I'm at 512 right now. I feel good, and you're not going to stay there. You visit it. They asked the Dalai Lama one time, are you enlightened? And he looked at him and he smiled and he said, not at the moment. This, it's not, there's no permanent arrival. We arrive again and again. That's the idea behind it. So little goes a long way. That's the point. And the thing that's really cool is each circle positively impacts the other. So we didn't have to focus on relationships when we doubled that score. But what happens when you're feeling a little bit better in vitality? What happens when your value is expressing better? Isn't that going to have a ripple effect out on your relationships? Without even looking at it, is it possible that if you were to revisit this 4 weeks later, your relationships went up to an 8, that they flexed up? Simply through the act of understanding how all of these things work dynamically together, and your focus is on the value of the integration between them, right? So that's what you pay attention to. Making sense so far? We good? Yeah? All right. So now we're going to add another piece to it, and this is about, this is the part that I added in. So that first part was from my mentor, and it was his concept of these 3 circles, and one of the things that he asked of me was to just, help keep his work going. The last 2 years of life, he passed away from cancer, and the last 2 years of his life, he tried to dump 50 years worth of knowledge into my brain. Fortunately, we'd already worked together for 25, but it was an accelerated process. So part of what I would do is take the things that he was teaching me, and then we would try to evolve it. Anyone raise your hand? The blue circle, is anyone familiar with what that is? What that's called? No? Cool. It's actually, the term for it is usually Enzo or Zen circle. And basically it's a practice. It's a Zen practice of taking a paintbrush and making a perfect circle with one stroke. So if you look at it, you can see where the paintbrush was placed to the canvas, and then kind of swooped around, and then where it was lifted off and it's kind of jagged on the end. And this was a meditation thing. It was part of a principle we learn in martial arts called Mushin, which means no mind. And the idea is to get your mind, your ego, your attachment to an outcome out of the way, and just make a circle. And that's it. And, they make hundreds of these, and every once in a while, one would come out perfect. That was the Zen circle. And when it happened, the question the teacher would ask you is, what was that? And your reaction would be nothing special. because it's just one more time. It just happened that that time was, was a perfect Zen circle. So what I was taught, if you were to look at this now and imagine as you're looking at this circle, instead of looking at it two-dimensionally, imagine that you're looking down at it. And this is three-dimensional. And that jagged end on the left side of the space, it's the circle rising up towards you, and then the full end is a spiral. So you can actually very quickly, with just a little bit of a different perception, a little knowledge shared with you, you can instantly change your view, right? And that's a lot of what this is about. It's about the perspective. It's, the Buddhists would say we all have ignorance all the time. That's not a bad thing. That's just a human thing. And part of what our work is to dispel that ignorance, right? So, and actually, I was taught that that's what guru means, dispeller of darkness. They don't know anything. They just help you shine a light on what you already know. You're just not seeing it yet, right? So a lot of this is, there's no judgment here. Is the point. It's about building a perspective that allows you to make changes that work in service to you. And in you making those changes, that's what's going to allow you to expand that impact to the people around you. So one of the things that we do, we're going to look at each circle a little bit more closely. And as you do, the model we use is to think in terms of the different elements of your life and the habits that you have and the places that you invest your time and attention, and assign them as best you can one of three things: a plus, a neutral, or a minus. So a plus would be something that adds to the value of one of those circles. And we'll talk about some examples of that to get you thinking. A neutral are just the things we need to do that don't really add or subtract. And then a minus is something that takes away, like it's going to pull that score down. They are not negatives. They are minuses. We all have things in our lives. So if you're in startup mode and you've got a great project going and you're losing a little bit of sleep, that's a minus on your vitality circle, right? But it's acceptable. We just need to be aware of it. We all have minuses in our lives. We all have things that are neutrals. We can't turn everything into a plus. That's just not possible. And we're not judging this. We're just getting clear, right? So starting with the vitality circle, we're going to go into each one a little bit more deeply. So the first question is, what does vitality mean to you? And there's something that my teacher said to me years ago, and it always struck me as being one of those sneaky, powerful things. And he said, be vigilant when you start communicating with people who are telling you, if you were more like me, you'd be okay. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting one. And if you think about it, how often does someone find something that works for them? And it's not, again, not a negative. They're passionate. They're passionate about what works for them, right? So for example, one of the ways I stay healthy is I run about 120 miles a month. Most people are not going to do that. And I would never recommend that. I mean, that just happens to be one of the things that I use to nurture my vitality. For other people, it can be walking, it can be Tai Chi, it can be drinking more water. It doesn't matter. So the important thing is you're answering the question with a focus on the last two words, to you. What does vitality mean to you? And give yourself permission to change your mind. There's no right answer here. This is a process, right? So, and you can think about it physically, right? Mentally, spiritually, in a lot of Qigong, a lot of martial arts, that's more kind of integration based. We talk about Jing, Qi, and Shen. And Jing is kind of the embodied, the somatic experience, the physical experience. And then Qi is your heart energy, right? That's the emotional expression. And then Shen is the intention, the intellect, the cognition. So each of those has its own source of vitality. And when you understand what those look like, you can start to integrate them and really cool things start to happen. So, if you haven't asked yourself the question, the answer isn't relevant. It's asking yourself the question that's relevant. right? And won't it be interesting to see what your answer is? So same thing with relationships. What do relationships mean to you? And you break this into the two parts. What do you value in your relationships with others? And what do you value in your relationship to yourself? When do you feel good about your relationship with yourself? What does that look like? What are the things that lead to that? Right? So that's your relationship circle and the question you answer there. And then value. What does value mean to you? And this one, I like to, when you think about your unique contributions, what comes to mind? What is my personal favorite expressions is dropping pebbles and making ripples, and thinking, you hold a pebble in your hand and that's like your contribution. It's you're holding it, and the value comes when you let it go, right? And then it falls and there's a point of impact, it strikes the surface of the water, and all you had to do is let it go. The ripples just spread, right? So you just have to recognize that you have a contribution that you're holding and then release it so that the rest of us can benefit from it. If you're not sure the answer, ask people that you trust. What would they say? What do you think my unique contributions are? They probably see you a little bit more clearly sometimes through this lens than you may see yourself, right? So you got the three circles, and now you go a little bit deeper, right? So the idea is you just take this through like you're peeling back layers of an onion. So if you think about your relationship to the things that actually impact your vitality, this is where we get into that plus minus neutral thing, where you can make some notes for yourself, you can practice. When I work with people, we do an attention audit, and we go through the day and we think about, what's your relationship to these things? What does your daily rhythm look like? How do you move through your day when you're thinking about vitality? And here's some examples of things to consider, right? So how is the quality of your sleep? Not quantity, but quality. Do you get enough deep sleep? Do you get enough REM sleep? Is it, how many 90-minute cycles uninterrupted are you able to get? Does that get disrupted? What does work do for you? Your activity level, the people that you connect with. And you just take yourself, and these are just 6 examples, but you can have as many things as you want that you're basically just assigning a plus and neutral and a minus to, right? And the idea is through all of this, once you kind of get a snapshot, you get a clear picture for you of how these things are having an impact. If you want to increase your life fulfillment score, so you want to take that vitality from a 5 or 6, now you just look for things that are minuses and you look for opportunities to swap them out with something that would be a neutral or a plus. That creates just simple math, create a net positive, right? So if you have a -3, can you turn it into a -2? Now your score went up, right? And, I've had some people that got really crazy with the math part of it. That's great. I did not, for me, it was more just kind of, I just hold a little bit of space and think my way through this and think, if I could, I remember one of the most significant things I did was I started subscribing to a fitness tracker called Whoop. It's designed for athletes. And one of the things it does is it tracks your sleep. And based on the amount of effort and strain, how much I'm training, it prescribes how much sleep you need the next day or that night to recover overnight. And just being able to quantify that was huge. It helped me understand how sleep was impacting me at a much higher level. So simple example, it can be looking at things like nutrition, and just maybe there's foods that make you feel a little, inflamed or fatigued or something like that, and just swapping out with something that's better for you. We had a guy that basically put a pitcher of water in front of his 2-liter bottle of soda in the refrigerator so that he had to consciously reach behind the water to grab the soda. And he cut his soda intake down by 50% in a day just by creating a new habit, Yeah. And it was such a silly, simple thing. And it didn't really stress him out, because sometimes he would reach around it and take the soda, but he found that it was just easy to drink less soda and drink more water. That was it. So one of the things to consider with this is knowledge. And there are times where, a lot of times we focus on being under knowledge, and we need to learn more things. You can be over knowledge. you can have taken in so much information that you are now paralyzed because it's all conflicting. You went down the YouTube rabbit hole, and now you're afraid to eat or drink anything ever again or exercise in any way because someone who said it was good, someone else said it was bad, and all the, so we're looking for in each of these categories to reach a place of balance. And one of the things that if you think about like an acupuncture model, what they're looking at is what's overworking, what's underworking. If your liver's underworking, you need to stimulate it. If it's overworking, you need to calm it. So, when you're considering your approach to each of these circles, how can you move yourself into a place of balance where you don't feel like you're sucking in so much information now that it's stressing you out worse, or you're taking action without really having enough informed information to take action that's going to be helpful, and you're just doing things without. So it's something to consider as you're playing with these three circles. Relationship with others. There's a couple things to think about here. What is the impact of the relationship for you? How does the relationship you have with someone else, is it a plus, minus, or neutral? And it's, sometimes raising kids, that relationship is a minus, especially when they're teenagers, but it's an acceptable minus. It's just part of helping them through a difficult phase of their lives, but it's going to be a depletion on you, right? So that. So you may need to replace, may need to supplement that with a good friend, or someone else who can add a little positivity and support you to offset the fact that you're just in a difficult relationship. Could be a coworker or whatever. What's the impact of the relationship for them? And staying with the teenagers, being present as a parent, as a good model for that teenager. Yes, it may be a minus for you, but my goodness, is it a plus for them, right? So, and that makes it worthwhile, right? So you're looking through this perspective and getting clear. And again, don't judge it, and sometimes it may make you realize this relationship is unhealthy in its current incarnation for me, and I need to actually figure out what to do about that. That may happen. Other times it's just like, yep, own it. Here's where you're at, right? Big old minus in my relationship circle, and that's okay. And then the last part of that is, what does the investment of energy and attention feel like? Is it appropriate, right? Sometimes we have someone that needed help and support from us, and then somehow we fell into a pattern of, throwing just care down the well, and it's reached a point where we need to pull back from that and maybe establish a boundary. Is it, or we're neglecting something, right? There's just not enough energy or attention going to it. So again, you look through this, give yourself a score, and it's just a simple way to assess this overall circle by asking yourself a few questions and then seeing what comes to mind, right? We doing okay so far? Okay, yeah, okay, cool. All right. So now, same thing, your relationship with yourself, right? What are some of the roles that you play in your life? And how do you feel when you're in that role? And I'll give you an example of this, because, as I believe that we should be the human that we feel called to be, and try to design our lives in a way where we can feel a sense of alignment as we shift from role to role. So during the pandemic, I was working with a lot of parents who all of a sudden became school teachers for their kids. And, they're doing the remote learning, and it was very stressful because the children were seeing mom as mom. And one of the first things we did was we started helping these parents design what we call learning cockpits. So these were places in their home where the child would sit in it like they were getting behind the wheel of a car or an airplane. And it was like the environment was specific to learning. And then we had to take the mom. My favorite was one mom. She bought a wizard's hat off of Amazon. And she would put this big, tall wizard's hat on and say, I am no longer mom. I am now your teacher. And she'd shift that role with that signal, and the kids behave completely differently, right, as soon as she did that. So it was just this recognition that, we all have these different roles that we assume, and who we are does change a little bit when we're in them. We can't always have full control over the roles that we're in, but we should be aware of how they're impacting that relationship circle. So, there's a statistic years ago that more heart attacks happened at 9 a.m. on Monday because people they'd literally rather die than go back to work. So, so they're having a challenge, in that role. That role of going to work has become such a minus that they've lost perspective on how to balance that out. Right. So, so that's the relationship with yourself part, just asking you that question. And then the other thing that's always interesting is perceived control. And, a lot of times, I think it was Dennis Waitley said years ago, he did a presentation called The Psychology of Winning. And he said, we experience happiness in direct proportion to the level of control we feel we have over our lives. And the reality of it is, control is like balance. It's illusory. We don't actually have control. However, the type of ways that relationships can be influenced, sometimes it's fixed. It's something that really, your actions won't make any changes, right? It is what it is. It's just this relationship is this way. So it's good to know that, so you're not banging your head against the wall trying to influence something that really is not influenceable. So, it's like, if you're Admiral Stockdale and you're a prisoner of war, you have very little control over your life. But what he could do was he could play a round of 18 holes of golf every day while he was a POW. It's in his book. It was amazing. And then he came home weak and barely able to stand and shot right onto his handicap a week after he came home. That was the thing that kept him alive, that sustained him through that, right? Some are flexible. We have control. We have influence. We can change it, right? We can, take that relationship. We can shift the way it's manifesting. We have that ability. And then some relationships are fluid. And what I mean by that is you don't know what you're going to get. So I'm sure you've all, if you have clients, you've worked with clients who you don't know which version of them you're going to get from day to day, right? And they can be an adventure, right? So they're fluid. Sometimes we have work environments that are very fluid like that. I've worked with kids, so you never knew when a child was going to go running out of a classroom in their underwear yelling never. It would happen, or just all kinds of interesting things like that. So just being aware of that, not necessarily to do anything about it, but just you're creating clarity for yourself in the way you view these circumstances in your life so that you can be a little bit more intentioned about what you choose to do or not do about it. Okay. So, and then finally, we have value. So how do your value contributions impact you, and how do they impact the world around you? And this one, I always think about Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, which is a really cool book. And he talks about the zone of genius and the zone of excellence. And it's very interesting because when he talks about the zone of excellence, he's like, very often we're caught in the act of being good at something, having an expertise at it, and then we get trapped into doing it because we're good at it and people come to rely on us. So you stay in a job or you're performing in a way that's helpful. So the value on the world around you is significant, right? But what he would say is if you're not in your zone of genius, the value to you may not be proportionate to the value it's creating for others. And that's where people would burn out or they'd sabotage their own success. He tells a story about a billionaire who almost got divorced because he would fight with his wife over the cost of the toilet paper she was buying. He was a billionaire. And it just had to do with he wasn't happy. And it expressed itself in an unhealthy way. And he was like really not aware of that because he hadn't really thought through. He wasn't in a zone of genius. He was just in a zone of excellence. Not a bad thing. It just wasn't leaving him fulfilled, and he didn't have tools that would allow him to navigate that in a healthier way, right? So it's good to look at that. And again, you just give yourself that plus minus neutral. Sometimes, especially early on, it may be a minus for us in the way it's impacting us, but the plus outweighs that for a time. But how long before that needs to change? When does that circle need to become a spiral? And if you're assessing regularly, you can start to notice that and watch for symptoms that maybe something isn't serving you as well anymore. You're watching for trend lines and you can catch it a little earlier. So all of a sudden you recognize a dip in vitality. A lot of people do that. Their value contribution isn't working for them, and it starts sucking away their vitality. They get sick, or it impacts their relationships. So you're starting to see dips in other circles, and now you're trying to, that's clues you can follow back to figure out what change you need to make. So, and then when you think about the level of energy and attention, right? Just like with the relationships, it's how does that feel? Are you underworking for based on what you want to be doing? Are you overworking, and risking burnout? Is it consuming you? Is it depleting other circles unnecessarily? Or are you in that place of optimization, and remember, none of this is static. Like when you think about balance, if you stand on one leg, your muscles are working. They're just working very subtly, but there's a lot of energy going in to holding what appears to be stasis. But we would say it's stillness, it's movement that approaches stillness. You're not actually still, right? So, so don't like think this is something where you win. It's like, I'm in balance, yay. That's not the way it works. We just get quicker and quicker at noticing when we're moving too far in one direction. So we get faster and more skillful at correcting in real time. That's all that happens. And then from the outside, it looks like balance. But from the inside, you feel like you're just surfing waves, right? So basically the last part is thinking about, how you create that rhythm towards arriving again and again at 3/8, right? So, and again, we don't stay there. We don't just go there and then we get to the top and we win, yay, right? This is a process. It's a perspective that allows us to see our life where we've made a commitment to arrive at 3/8, at 512, again and again, and probably more gracefully and effortlessly over time, right? So one of the things that you can think of, one model that I like when you're tending to these circles is, and this is to keep from trying to fix everything all at once, or crashing and burning and fixing nothing, right? So I would assign one of three kind of words to each of the circles: nurture, maintain, and evolve. With the idea being that nurture is something that is in like a recovery mode, right? So it's when you're letting it heal, you're letting it rest. You're not putting a lot of like yang energy into it. It's like a yin energy. Maintain is you're just going to keep doing what you're doing. You're not going to tweak it. You're not going to change it. It's working. Leave it there, right? And then the evolve is where you're adding that energy, right? So now so maybe you're making some changes. So that's where you're thinking, all right, where are the pluses I can put? I'm going to make 5 extra phone calls because value is the one that I want to add energy to, or I'm going to go take a master class so I can improve it. But you don't try to, fix your relationships, add to your value, and start working out, lifting weights when you've never done it before, all at the same time, right? You pick one and you just assign them. So let's say relationships are how to maintain, and you're going to nurture your vitality. You're not going to just be in recovery, heal up a little bit, and you're going to focus on evolving your value. And then the month goes by, you reassess your life fulfillment score, right? You go through this process, and then you just pull these back out and putting them in somewhere new. So you just decide, okay, my relationships are now going to be in my nurture. I'm just going to kind of rest in that. I'm not going to push to change anything or improve anything. I'm just going to enjoy them. Value, I like where I'm at, so I'm going to sustain it. I'm going to add enough energy to sustain it. And now I'm focused on making change in vitality. So each, let's say, month, you get to incrementally make these adjustments without feeling like you're trying to do too much at any given time. And that's it. Hang on, let me stop this sharing. Stop share. There we go. And hi.
Any questions? Show of hands. Who thought that was helpful? We got some value, some takeaways. Cool. Next show of hands. Do we have any questions for Ken? We've got another 10 minutes or so. Anyone have any questions about this process? it seems like to me
So,
you can actually have, like you said, with the math, you can kind of apply it in your own little way. You can kind of apply it at depth, and really go into it every month, assigning, and delegating which area you're going to evolve or maintain or nurture, and
yep.
really study the math and go through all your activities and all those different things. Or you can, it seems like with you with the math, you kind of hold it loosely and say, okay, yeah, I kind of understand that I'm at a 7 here, a 4 here, a 6 here, and maybe I shift this activity, or maybe I take this activity out, replace it with this for the next few weeks, and see and elevate that. It's sort of, everyone can
Yeah.
apply it in different ways. Is that right?
Yeah. And it gives you the ability to experiment, and the whole idea behind of it, an experiment is how can I track the result? Right. So giving yourself some kind of, because the score is less relevant than the trend lines, so how is it changing over time? And what are the things that are leading to that change? So, and that's what gives you, the clarity. The other thing is I use this to basically assess a business. So if you think about your business, what's your value contribution of your business? What's that number? What are the relationships in your business with your team, if you have a team, with yourself, with your client base, right? Assessing that. And vitality. How's revenue generation? How much effort is going into what needs to be automated, what needs to be upgraded? You can use this exact same model to assess the health and well-being of your business and figure out ways to elevate that. So same thing applies. You can apply this to anything, and it's easy to teach to someone. So if you have someone in your life that, they're struggling, and a lot of times it's just a lack of perspective. So you give them something that you can now share, and it becomes a shared language. And it's like, hey, let's work to 512 together. Let's celebrate when one of us hits it, and let's be there for each other when we're feeling like we're at an 8, and things are really rough, or just, that you're stuck. My vitality's been at a 6 and I'm frustrated. All right. Well, how can we talk about that? So it just gives you a way to communicate that's kind of graceful. And a lot of times what I found, a lot of the models I built, it's like breaking through patterns of like karmic patterns, like a lot of corporate, trainings. It triggers a lot of baggage that they have, so, and it can be that in family dynamics too. So, like with families, we started teaching them a 5 animal mindset, because it's like you have a kid that's very crane-like, where they're empathic, they're very laid back, non-confrontational, and then mom's very tiger-like. She's like lead from the front, just step up. She's fierce, she's powerful. But if you give them that language, all of a sudden they're like, oh, you're different from me, but that has value. It's just a different way. We could learn from each other. And you'd see communication just explain. Yeah, I'm describing a lot of people there. And yeah, yeah, we use that. I use that in corporate settings. There's basically, Tiger's kind of action, confidence oriented. Crane is understanding, perspective, yielding. Leopard is innovative, creative, tends to think around corners and in different ways. And then snake is analytical and very kind of detail oriented. So you start recognizing those 4 things in the way we process. And then you learn to practice all of them until you develop what we call 5 ways to win. And that's the 5th animal, which is the dragon. So it's being able to effortlessly apply these different problem-solving mindsets to the benefit of yourself and others. So yeah, that's a whole nother topic though.
I'm loving this. I think we can all find, I think some things can come to mind easily of how you can elevate your vitality, right? Elevate your value, your relationships. It's very, like, you think today, what can you do, like one thing today? Whether it's drink the water instead of the soda, whether it's just go for a quick walk, whether it's, do 10 push-ups, whatever it is. There's always some things we can add, and same with relationships. Hey, let me just send this kind message to a friend I haven't talked to in a while. Or let me give a smile and simple conversation to someone on the street. You know, they're just very simple, but it adds up. It adds up and it
Yeah.
amplifies. You know, this is where the spiral comes into it. They all amplify off each other with that area of focus. It's very cool.
Yeah. And, isn't it nice to give yourself permission to just not some days and then be able to genuinely assess that without bludgeoning yourself and then just get back to it. All right, I had a bad day, and I didn't smile. I didn't give anyone a smile today. Fine, I'll do it tomorrow. It's okay. It's dynamic and it gets to move with you. And the idea is to just check in, and just the one thing that you stay committed to is your own commitment to the idea of tending to these three circles. And it works best when you're thinking about the value it's bringing, to the things that matter to you, the people and the causes that you serve. So, but yeah, it leaves space. And I think that's what really led to building this. Is I spent, a couple decades immersed in personal development. And sometimes it's exhausting. You're just getting yelled at to do more and try harder and be more disciplined and more. It's like, wait a minute. Half of all power comes from knowing how and when to relax. One of the fundamental principles of martial arts. Sometimes the effort gets in the way. So this was a perspective that helped you, kind of balance that.
Yeah, I like the space that's created around it and the ease. It's almost like it's easeful. It's not meant to be stressful. It's not meant to be end all be all, but it's more just a level of just more grace. Just even with 3/8, it's not your goal to be there the whole time. We're going to fluctuate, and it's just getting back there, just with a lot of ease and flow, and a lot of grace for yourself, a lot of patience. Yeah, I definitely like that. Ken, thanks so much. How can we get around you, support you, find out more about what you're doing?
I think the big thing is, so I built a community around this whole concept, and it's one of the social software. It's in the Mighty Network, and it's free, and it's yourlifespiral.com. And you can join it. And there's actually these spaces where you can ask questions and share ideas in each of these three circles. And, it's still, I haven't really gotten it to take off, mainly because I haven't really talked about it that much yet. So that's the process we're going through now. But the idea was to create a space where people could support each other in this idea, of just viewing your life through this lens and kind of breaking this seduction of, like, I feel like it's anti-hustle culture. It's just, as an entrepreneur, I feel so grateful for being present through my own journey. And sometimes it's been very difficult. Sometimes it's been amazing, but the journey is the home. It's all you have. So why aren't you enjoying it now? Why aren't you an active participant? Put your hands up and enjoy the ride, whatever it may be, because in the end, when you look back, that's all you had. So, and I just work with too many entrepreneurs, especially, who were so busy delaying gratification to get somewhere. And then they got there, they got the house or the car or the big business, whatever it was. And they're not happy, because they look back and they forgot to live while they were, chasing the dream. So I wanted to create a little community where people could, share and support each other as they were figuring out what worked for them, and we could kind of borrow brilliance from each other and spread the idea so that more people could find joy and grace in their lives.
Love it. Awesome. Everyone, we're starting the collaborative call in 4 minutes. I've just put the link there to the chat. Ken, if you have your link to the LifeSpiral community, would you be able to throw that in the Zoom as well? Jenny's asking for it. Thank you all for joining live. If you're watching the recording and the replay, hopefully this helps as well. And I think everyone has Ken on Facebook as well, if you want to reach out to Ken for anything he's doing, any links, anything that pops up that interests you. If not, reach out to me. I'll connect you with Ken. That's easily done. I'll see you guys in a few minutes on the collaborative call if you can make it. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Ken. You guys are awesome.
Yeah.
I'll see you same day and time next week, okay?
See you all in a minute.
Take care. Bye-bye.